Welcome, everybody, to a special meeting of council, Monday, June 1st, 2020. So before we call the meeting to order, I just note it's our second virtual council meeting, and things went pretty well last time, but we're still working out some of the details of it. We're using MS Teams software, but those who will be watching, they'll see some recent changes. There's a larger group of people that will show up on the screen. This is being live streamed on YouTube, so we want to welcome people while they are watching us in a couple of moments. We still are dependent on the technology, and a couple of times last time I got pushed off and came back within a few seconds, but if I do disappear again, Deputy Mayor Aiken will pick up that role until the technology brings me back, or if it doesn't. And so again, as well, we do not yet have mastered the question period portion. So for those who have questions after they've seen the meeting, please send in an email with your questions and we'll do the best to get a hold of you. So tonight, councillors, remember to try to, if you're prepared to speak, to let us know. We still haven't got the hand system working as well as we like. And please recall to mute your microphones otherwise, or else we'll all get pretty noisy out here. And I would look for a motion to approve the agenda. Is there such a motion?
Councillor Tower, I'll move we accept the agenda.
Councillor Tower.
I'll second it.
Councillor Butcher seconded. Motion to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Before we get into the public session, Councillor Finney, this is turned over to you. You'd asked for a few minutes at the start of the meeting to speak. Councillor Finney, can you hear me?
Looks like he's locked up.
Yeah, it does. We'll return to Councillor Finney when he gets hooked back in. So we will advance onto the agenda. But if Councillor Finney returns in a moment or two, we will turn it back to him once we're finished our first items. Okay, so Hospice SAN and Southeast New Brunswick Capital Campaign. You've seen the package from Mr. Burke. A presentation for this from Councillor Ramperso from Riverview, working on behalf of the hospice last fall. After that presentation, we got a note from the hospital auxiliary asking that we do not provide a direct donation, that there was some plans about a palliative care potential investment at the hospital. We wrote back to them saying, please let us know what your plans are so we can decide on this. And we never did hear back from them for some time. We got a second contact from the hospice campaign noting that we were the only ones who had yet to reply. And so we, between myself and Mr. Burke, we did call the auxiliary and remind them where it had been left. And what it became apparent was that very soon after, this was in November, we wrote them a letter, late November, I believe it was. And very soon after they changed leadership, they had made a decision that they didn't want to go forward with the palliative care locally, and no one told us. They all thought somebody called some of us to say, disregard what we said before, but they did not. So they have clarified it now that that reason we did not address it before has been addressed by the auxiliary and also by the local group that supports the hospice as well. So it's back in our ballpark. So one of the questions we will have is whether next week you should look at, as a council, a grant towards the hospice donation program as we've been asked. Mr. Burke, would you like to add to anything to that, or?
No, thank you, Worship. No, I think you covered the you've covered the basics. So I don't have anything further to add.
So
sorry to interrupt there. I'm not getting the Microsoft Teams showing up on the live stream. So can I just hold us for 1 or 2 minutes?
Okay.
I'm just going to restart the connection.
Do we have to go back, Mike? Or?
Well, I would say go ahead with the meeting. It is showing just the council chambers.
Sorry, somebody's got their mic on. I can't hear Mike very well. What did you say? Are we starting all over again?
No, the live stream is only showing council chambers, and I can't get it to switch over. Unfortunately, everybody can hear. They just won't see the audio that's happening through the Microsoft Teams.
Okay, sorry about that. We apologize to everybody for that. Unfortunately, a lot of us dressed up perfectly for this session, as you'll never know that. So, any questions from council on the hospice capital campaign? You'll get requests next week to consider providing a grant to them in terms of the capital. As you might recall, we were asked, based upon a per capita basis of contributions of all the local governments in the southeast New Brunswick, to participate in the building of this hospice. So our total was around $7,000 or so, I think. I don't have that number directly in front of me. Mr. Burke, do you have that number?
$9,700.
9,007. So I'd had it 79. It's 97. Any other questions on it, folks?
I have a question, Your Worship. Councillor Michaud here.
Sure. Thank you.
Just clarity. So this would fall underneath the community development grants. Is that correct? Or is that where that would come from, let's say in 2021, 2022?
Mr. Burke, I believe that's what we were talking about, wasn't
it? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Michaud. That's exactly what it would be. Similar to the process we use for the Tantramar Seniors College this past year.
Okay. So my other question is, I understand the benefit of this to, even though it's not being built in Sackville, I understand the benefit to the residents of Sackville. We had a request during the last grant process from the ATV Club, which was denied or not advanced because it was outside of Sackville, even though it would have benefited the residents of Sackville. So I'm just kind of wondering what type of precedents we're setting here by moving forward. Are we going to consider those type of grants in the future, or?
That will be council's decision. You're correct that we had the similar question from SPCA in Moncton based upon a regional approach, and I believe we did not choose to participate in that campaign. And you are correct that this is a regional campaign. We can tell you that the local hospice, I don't know, I'm forgetting the title. You guys have probably seen it, but the local hospice people say that people from Sackville will definitely be using that and that they fully support it. So that's one answer, but you're correct that council will have to make that choice.
Yeah, Sorry, Your Worship. One thing that I did also forget to mention is that all of the municipalities in Albert, Kent, and Westmoreland who have been approached, including the local service districts, have all at this point agreed to the regional campaign. So at the moment, we're the only municipality who hasn't agreed to participate in the fundraising campaign. So I think that's also important information to have.
Mhm. Any other questions on that will come before you next week?
Yes, Your Worship. If I may, Councillor O'Neill.
Hey, thank you.
I'm just wondering we still have no idea where we are with our hospital, what's going to take place down here. And also there was word that there might be a complex built by the Laffords. So I'm just wondering if this is a good time for us to put money outside of our town at this time. I would think that we might have, if they go ahead and nothing happens with us, we might have the opportunity to step up to the plate. But I'm just wondering, I know that when I met with the auxiliary, none of the auxiliary members were in favor of that because they couldn't see putting their loved ones from Sackville in the place up there and wondering how we could travel back and forth. So anyway, just my food for thought.
Yeah, and we'll have a motion next week where those things will be debated. And in terms of what the question is there any other questions about the actual pitch we've heard from people? Okay, so be prepared for that for next week. And we'll take that off. Now, I did note that when Councillor Finney was back in, and it appears he is, that Councillor Finney, we had arranged to start you off with the agenda that you had arranged to make, wanted to speak to the public at this meeting. Are you prepared now to do that? Are you still online?
I am, Your Worship.
Okay, there you go. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. The two complaints that came against me were one that was that I did not sign the code of
that's
code of conduct for council, as a matter of fact, which passed on the 9th of March, 2020, and I did not sign it within 7 days. That is true. I was contacting Assistant Goodwin, and she asked me if verbally agreed to signing it. I said at that time I would rather wait until I had a chance to speak with a lawyer or the local government. Since that time, the night that actually we all got together and the sanctions were put against me as to what I'm doing now, addressing the public, is that I did agree to sign. I agreed to the signing of the code of conduct, and as they were asking me to turn around and publicly tell people that I am willing to turn around and abide by the code of conduct now. I will tell people, though, that I am still going to be contacting the local government to see whether or not I do or do not have to sign this code of conduct. In the past, a lot of motions have come forward, and even when there was a dissenting vote, there was times when actually the dissenter still signed the motion as well. I don't think it has ever been challenged whether you do or do not have to sign it. So, hello?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay, I just clicked out for a second there, John. Anyway, so therefore, I have agreed to sign the code of conduct. I will publicly address the fact that I am going to abide by it because it is something that has been passed and put forward, but I am still going to speak with local government to determine whether or not it has to have to be signed by a dissent. The other issue was the fact that it was a code of confidentiality that I supposedly broke. That was between council and KBRS when we were talking on April 6th about the appointment of the new CAO, Mr. Burke. I supposedly used words that the contractor consultant supposedly said. And so therefore, I'm not sure if I did or did not, because I haven't heard the whole recording, and it's been some time since I made my statement. April 6th is some time ago. So I'm not sure if I did or did not break the code of confidentiality, the confidentiality agreement between KBRS and whatever. But at the present time, I have been given a letter of reprimand by the mayor. I will abide by what he has put forward. And so therefore, I don't know much more I could say, but except that I will look into whether or not I did break the confidentiality agreement between KBRS and council. So I think, and I apologize for making it more complicated than it should have been. When I look back on it, I wish I had have turned around and agreed to it and then did my investigation. But at the time, I didn't think it was a big problem to put it off until a little later on, until I acquired the information I was looking for. And I think pretty much that's the summation of it all, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Finney. And just so people understand, there was council resolutions on both of the matters that Councillor Finney has referred to, which led to him seeking to speak to the public here tonight. And that fulfills that that code of conduct activity. And we will move on to item number 2, bylaw number 274. And Ms. Hartling, are you discussing this first?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Bylaw number 274, a bylaw to regulate and license the owners and operators of taxi cabs within the town of Sackville, will replace bylaw number 188. We've made several changes to this bylaw, a lot being housekeeping changes. On the first page with the definitions, clerk has been changed to the bylaw enforcement officer, as the bylaw enforcement officer will be making all the decisions regarding this bylaw. The clerk initially just signed the paper copies of the licenses, which is now in ID format, so there's no longer any signing of them. Council has also been changed just to match the Local Governments Act definition. There wasn't much changes on page 2. Again, just changing the clerk to bylaw enforcement officer. Page 3, we've added 31C, that all cabs must furnish and display the license, which is basically to protect customers. They can see that this cab has been licensed for the town of Sackville. We've changed the date when the license will be issued due to the fact that town hall is closed over the Christmas vacation, and that gives the bylaw officer a little more time. Other housekeeping changes, such as the Narcotics Control Act has been changed to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. Fees have been increased. They have not been increased over the past more than 20 years. We thought it was time to increase them to keep up with the cost of issuing these licenses. Again, on page 441, the date for applications to be delivered to Town Hall has been pushed to November 30th. It still gives 2 months for the bylaw officer to issue those licenses and do his due diligence and inquiries, such as looking at criminal record checks. For 2B, again, the fee has increased somewhat. And then we removed, of course, Schedule C and Schedule D, which was the the format on which the licenses were issued. It was just the standard regular size paper, which is now in ID format. Page 52A. There isn't much changes there. Equivalent license, an individual could decide to call a taxi from their own community if they so desire to bring them home or even to bring them to Sackville. Page 6, 6, 7, and 6, 8, it's self-explanatory. No smoking in the cab, and especially in these times, the cab should be kept clean and neat. Any other changes? Page 7, 6 and 7, the bottom of page 6, top of page 7, we removed all information from the clerk, and nothing needs to go before council at this time, as the bylaws officer has been authorized by council to make all decisions in this bylaw. Page 7, 8C was added as Rural Rides is now operates as a nonprofit and is all right to operate in the town of Sackville. Penalties have been changed to match the provincial wording for fine payments. It's pretty much similar to what was there, just slight changes. And I think the only other change was page 11. We've asked if they intend to pick up passengers for fare. This is due to if an owner would like to have someone take their cab and pick up deliveries such as alcohol or maybe even groceries and have them delivered, but they would not be picking up passengers. And I believe that's all the changes, if there's any questions.
Open for questions or comments.
Councillor Michaud here, Your Worship.
Councillor Michaud, please.
Just to clarify, so have the cab companies been consulted, or will they be consulted with before we move this to second reading? Or
they will all be provided with a copy tomorrow. I should be able to get them out. We just wanted to pass it through the special meeting first.
Okay, thank you. A couple other questions on the 3.7. It states the bylaw officer may suspend or terminate any license issued under this bylaw for any reason they deem necessary. I'm just kind of wondering that any reason where there's specifics within the bylaw regards to infractions. What does any reason pertain to?
Mainly that would pertain to 3.5. I'm sorry, 3.4A. If they were convicted of under the Criminal Code of Canada on any of those infractions, then he really, I don't believe, would have many of the reasons to suspend or the license or terminate anybody's license besides those reasons. Mike may be able to clarify any of that.
Yeah, Councillor Michaud, we did put that in for any other reason. Just we don't know what it could be. There was nothing in our mind that is a reason right now. But rather than something coming up that would require the suspension of a license, we felt it was beneficial to have that wording in there than to have to come back for a rewrite of the bylaw in order to actually do a suspension of a license. There may be other codes within that somebody's been charged with that's not listed there as an example. So we just want to make sure that we have everything covered, that we would not have to come back for a bylaw amendment in the event that we're required to suspend a license.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, I guess, is under section 8, Rural Rides Tantramar. My understanding of their services is kind of like from inside our community to outside our community. Are you indicating now they'll be able to provide that service within our community?
Mike, can you take that one?
I'd have to look into that one, Councillor Michaud. I know there was some discussion originally, and they weren't listed in the bylaw, and when they were first set up, whether they had to get a taxi license or not. So we said no at the time, and we just wanted to clarify it within the bylaw that they would not require a taxi license. We can check to ensure that that is what they're doing, and if that is all that they are doing is coming from town to out of town, then we would not need to specify it because it would be exempted anyway. But we just felt it was better that they do get exempted, and then we don't have to. Then there's no question.
Right. Well, it's just that under B, it does indicate that special permission can be granted. So I'm just kind of wondering why specifically. I know that they're in operation, but if somebody else decides to open up or try to do something similarly, then are we going to start adding them to the list, or do we just group everybody underneath that granted special permission? So that's all.
Yeah, we can look into that further.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? I would note on the application for a taxi cab operator's license page that do you intend to pick up passengers for fare? That I believe we meant fare spelt in a different manner there.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Any other questions, folks, for this coming before you next week? Hearing none, we can move on then to item number 3. Tender hydraulic wheel excavator, Mr. Acton.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As part of our fleet management and capital budget process for 2020, council did approve the capital budget line item to replace the 10-year-old rubber-wheeled excavator. And as part of our fleet management, they also approved the mulcher for the excavator. So in preparation for this tender, we consulted obviously with staff and management, mechanics, and we put the tender together. And as part of this process, we felt the need to also include the mulcher, which is a part of our fleet management and was also approved capital item. We felt the need to include this mulcher with the excavator tender, because at that point the mulcher is going to go on the excavator, and the mulcher would then have to be plumbed properly, and the right oil flow and everything would have to be met as part of the tender. So in doing so, we did tender the two items together, the excavator and the mulcher. All the specifications were put into the tender for both units. And that tender 2020-05 was issued on May the 6th. There were 10 tender packages that were picked up during the tender process. And on the tender opening on May the 27th, we received 6 tender bids. And I think all council has a copy of the minutes from that tender opening and can see the variation of the bids range from a low of $387,061.12 all the way up to $509,662.75 being the top bid. Again, we evaluated the low tender, and it met all the specifications for the tender, both for the excavator and the mulcher. And the low tender bid was received by Paul Equipment and Sons, 2008, for the 2020 Doosan model DX 190W-5 rubber-wheeled excavator and the FAE hydraulic excavator mulcher, specified in the amount of $387,061.12. Now, the Doosan is a manufacturer that we haven't seen a lot of in our region. I did some additional homework as a result of that. Dieppe, the city of Dieppe has a Doosan excavator, rubber-wheeled excavator, and they've had it for 12 years. And after consulting with them, they are very pleased with the unit and have no complaints about it. I also found the city of Bathurst also has a Doosan, and they've had their Doosan for 2 years, and they too have no issues with the Doosan. And again, in doing even further research, the Doosan has been, the company originated, I believe, in 1878, and over the years it's evolved into the name that it is today, which is the Doosan. But it's a Korean manufacturer piece of equipment, which most of the excavators are originated in Europe. So that's a little bit of history on the low bid and the Doosan model. With respect to budget, if you remember, we had a capital budget line item for all of our fleet. So if you look at the excavator plus all of our other fleet, which is the float, the tag-along, and the mulcher. And if you remember that the mulcher that council approved, I believe last month, actually a few months ago now, we were over budget by about $4,000, I believe, dollars on that. And at that time, I had mentioned to council that we were going to see how the tenders come in for the excavator and the mulcher. And then based on that, hopefully the tendered price came in favorable, and we were able to fit all of the items in under our fleet budget. And lo and behold, that's exactly what had happened. Our total remaining budget after we take out the tag-along float is $386,174.65, HST included. And the low bid is $387,061.12. So you can see we're virtually on budget. We're I think $886 over budget on our fleet, entire fleet. So Your Worship, it is our recommendation that we would recommend that council award the tender 2020-05 to the low bid Paul Equipment and Sons Limited. And there will be a motion coming forward next Monday night. And Your Worship, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Right, comprehensive review. Open for questions. Anybody wish to ask a question on the tender? Hydraulic wheel excavator will come before you next week then. Hearing no question interest, we'll move on to number 4. And again, I think that's you, Mr. Acton, once again.
It is, Your Worship, thank you, and members of council. Again, as part of the 2020 capital budget process, council allocated capital budget money towards the trail improvements in the waterfowl park. Over the last several years, we've had we were very fortunate to have council approve the funds to replace all of the old boardwalks and bridges and trails. This capital project will complete the last 2 small sections of the old boardwalk and bridges in the waterfowl park. So the engineering department, we put together a tender, drawings and specifications for these 2 sections of boardwalk and bridges and the head walls to match up with the existing trails. The tender was an invited bid tender. It was issued on May the 10th to 7 of the local contractors within the town of Sackville. We thought, again, given the complexity of the type of boardwalk that we were doing, if you remember in the past, there were typically 2 contractors who had done most of the work for the boardwalks. We were, again, trying to keep the project local to the local to try to improve the local economy. We did an invited bid to all contractors in the Sackville region who have the ability to do such a project. So again, that tender was issued on May the 10th and closed on May the 26th. However, we only had 1 tender bid received at the time, and that bid was from Sackville General Contracting Limited in the amount of $45,701, HST included. The fortunate part is Sackville General Contracting has a lot of experience building these boardwalk and bridges. And if you remember, just recently, last fall, Sackville General Contracting did the Rotary Bridge and Boardwalk project, which turned out nice. So very disappointing again that we didn't have more contractors bid, but we just had the one bid. And with respect to budget, you'll see that, again, we're very close to budget. I think it's $1,594 over budget. So we are very, very close to our budget item for that particular capital item. Your Worship, I would be happy to answer any questions of council.
Thank you. Council, any questions on this item?
Your Worship, Councilor Michaud here.
Go ahead, please.
Just to get some clarity on previous tenders with regards to the boardwalk, has it usually just been, are we actually getting some bidding happening, or are we usually only getting like one coming forward or one or two? And do you have any idea of maybe what's creating the fact that there's not an interest in bidding on this tender?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Yeah, I can speak to both of those. With respect to the previous boardwalks, we typically only had, there were two contractors in Sackville actually that did all of the work, that being Sackville General Contracting and Billy Tapley's construction company. And all of the phases of the boardwalk were done by one or the other of those two contractors. With respect to this particular one, there were no contractors who had come back to us even during the bidding process and indicated any issues with the tender. A lot of them we're hearing have picked up a lot of work after this little break in COVID-19. So a lot of the contractors are extremely busy now and have a lot of work booked for the summer and fall. That was a factor in it for sure as to why some of them didn't bid it. A few of the other things, although no one has approached me directly, but a few of the things that can cause a bit of problems for smaller contractors is the fact that this is a tender and all of our tender bids require bid bonds or certified checks that have to be accompany the tender. And I think everyone understands the reason for bid bonds and certified checks. And in this particular case, I believe it was 15% or 10%, depending on whether you're doing a bid bond or certified check, had to accompany the tender. Now that could mean, you know, anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 that they would have had to upfront in order to get a certified check. Yes, if they don't get the job or council doesn't award it to them, then they do get that money back. But it means that they have to at least finance that cost up front while the tendering process is going on. So that sometimes will deter some of the smaller contractors from bidding because of these bid bonds and certified check. Although again, not one of the contractors came back and specified that they had any issues with that, but I am hearing through conversations with other people that those potentially could be some of the issues.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other councillors? Mr. Acton, one of the things we've had difficulty with in the costs on the boardwalks has been the depth of the foundation. Was there any chat about that, or are these actually following a similar route that we would know how deep they are and that cost is covered properly?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in regards to that, yes and no. What we did was in this particular, in order to get a true understanding of how deep we would have to put the helicals, and that's what the Worship is talking about. Remember, the helicals, they have to go down until they hit a certain torque. But so what we looked at in this particular project when we tendered it versus others is we'd actually tendered on longer helicals than we've done in the past as a result of that. What does that mean? And the other, so there's two things going on. One, we are closer to the upland in these particular projects. So obviously we're fairly confident that the depth of them is not going to be needed as deep because we are closer to the upland compared to the other projects where we were out really in the middle of the old waterfowl park. And as I indicated, we also increased the length of the helicals to try to prevent that from happening. So we're fairly confident, but you never be certain until you drill the helicals in. But we think we've got ourselves covered off on that.
Great, thank you. Any other on the boardwalk replacement, folks? If not, we'll move to item number 5. Pickleball courts. Mr. Pride, please.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. Council might recall last fall an enthusiastic presentation from the Tantramar Pickleball Group. Kirk Meldrum represented them, encouraging Council to consider changing the single tennis court at Bill Johnstone Memorial Park and converting it into a pickleball court. So Mr. Meldrum had provided us with some information at the time that allowed us to put together a bit of a plan, and as a result, Council approved a $9,000 capital budget item to make that transition into from 1 tennis court to 4 permanent pickleball courts. So there's quite a bit of material that's involved. You got to resurface the asphalt that's there with a paint that has some sand mixed in with it so that to prevent people from slipping, and plus you need to purchase and install 4 nets. So I reached out to several different companies that resurface tennis courts or sport or athletic courts, and I was able to get a price from one. There's different types of surfaces, and most of the companies that I was able to find did not provide the I guess the kind of the tar paint kind of material that we need for this project. So I was able to get a quote from one, Sportmaster Sport Surfaces, and their price was $12,000, around $12,000, which of course is a little bit more than the $9,000 that we had budgeted for originally. I was able to also get a small grant from the Community Investment Fund through the province for $1,700 to help offset some of the costs. And so that puts us about $1,400 short of what was budgeted for in the $9,000 for the capital project. We're confident that we're getting a good quality product, though. This company, they are from the States, but they do this work quite often, and they seem to know exactly what we needed when I talked to them. And and we also talked to the St. Antoine Pickleball Group, and the representative there was very helpful in helping us figure out exactly what we wanted. So we're confident with the product. In terms of the going over budget a little bit, I could let the treasurer speak to where that funding might come from, but we're hoping that council will approve the purchase of the pickleball materials for the new court for approximately $12,000, which is around $8,800 US, taxes in. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Evans here, Ppe. Matt, I noticed that it looks like 4 courts have already been painted on the tennis court. What would we expect in the future? Has this been done in anticipation of this, or is the resurfacing going to be done and it will be painted subsequently?
Yeah, good question. Those lines were painted a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
The pickleball group really wanted to get outside in the summer, and traditionally they play in the Mount Allison Gymnasium. Yeah. So at the time we had painted lines just using a regular line painter, same as we do for the streets.
Yeah.
And so there's some issues with that. One, I guess the asphalt surface is hard on the joints. This new surface would provide a little more cushion, and also it would fix any dead spots that there might be in the asphalt that doesn't allow the ball to bounce the way that it's meant to. And also the paint itself is slippery, so there's no grit or sand mixed in with that paint to allow for some grip on your sneakers. So if it's a little bit damp or on a hot, humid day, that paint can actually be quite slippery. And we have had pickleball players twist an ankle or slip and scrape a knee on that surface.
Great. No, thank you for that. That's reassuring.
Councillor Michaud here. I have a question, if I could.
Please do.
Just to clarify, so there's no firms within or companies within Canada that can provide what's required here for the resurfacing, and who's going to be doing the resurfacing? Is that municipal staff, or is that something that others are going to be doing?
Yeah, I reached out to 7 different companies, 6 of which were Canadian, one of which I know used to sell that material. And I called and emailed and checked on the website of that one particular company, and they seem to have disappeared. They were from out west, so I assume they must have went out of business. The other companies, they all got back to me, but none of them provided this material. So, they'd be more into building basically something from scratch, and which would be far, far more expensive. In terms of who's going to install it, there's a group of volunteers. I reached out to Kirk Meldrum and Paul Pan Vokey, amongst others, who are avid pickleball players in the area, and they're all ready and willing to volunteer their time to put the surface down. Also, the representative from the St. Antoine group has been a consultant with us, I guess you could say, and he's helped install these courts in several different locations, including back in St. Antoine and Shediac. So he has some experience in it, and he's going to come down and help guide them as well.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. Mr. Pride, you deferred to someone else to speak about the $1,400. Who did you defer to on that?
I thought the treasurer might be more appropriate than me.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, it is slightly over budget as far as the capital budget goes. There are a number of line items that will go slightly over, slightly under. I think the 1,400 is not huge, and I think it can be managed within our capital to revenue breakdown.
Any other questions on this topic, Council? We'll be coming before you next week. Hearing none, we can move on to item number 6. And Mr. Bowser, we're going to turn all 3 of them over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As council will recall, when the fire department submitted their 2020 capital projects, one of the line items in that was PPE replacement, which is bunker gear replacement. Bunker gear is the gear that the firefighters use when firefighting. So we reached out to our one and only supplier that provides Starfield Lion bunker gear. Starfield Lion bunker gear is a very good quality, high quality gear that we use for our members to keep them safe. And we've been using this gear in the department for upwards of 20 plus years. And we're very satisfied with the product that Starfield Lion provides, as well as Hake's firefighting boots, which is a certified structural firefighting boot that meets NFPA standards. So that being said, we reached out to Micmac Fire for the quote on those 2 items for 5 sets of Starfield Lion bunker gear and 5 sets of firefighting boots for a total cost of $19,187.75, including HST, and we had a budget for that line item of $24,000. So it falls well within the budgeted line item, and I would be happy to answer any questions that may be as it relates to that project. And I would note that we would be looking to propose a motion to bring in front of council next Monday evening for consideration.
Thank you. Any questions on the bunker gear replacement, folks?
Councillor Evans here. I have a comment. When the fire chief talked about PPE, I think in the last couple months, everybody knows what that means. Funny how things change.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for that. If there are no questions, Captain Bowser, you move on to number 2.
Once again, another item of our proposed capital projects for 2020 would be wildland PPE replacement, which is forest firefighting equipment. So we propose for 43 sets of wildland coveralls to be replaced. We received 2 quotes on that project. There is a difference, and I must note the gear that we have now is NFPA 1977 certified, and it is of a Nomax material. It's not a spray-in material or protection, so it is authentic Nomax material. And we reached out to both suppliers, Cummings Fire and Safety, as well as Micmac Fire and Safety. And Cummings Fire was, or Micmac Fire came in at $22,005.25, including HST. And Cummings Fire came in at $21,708.55, including HST. And for this project, we had a budget of $30,000. So again, it falls within those parameters. And we would also be looking to bring a motion in front of council next Monday night for their consideration.
Open for questions. I like the title, Wildland PPE.
Yes.
Hearing none, please move on to the 3rd item.
As council will recall, back on February 3rd, the fire department presented their interest to develop a training facility at the Public Works compound to enhance their skill sets in many different levels. This was brought forward for council's consideration on February 10th, which was supported unanimously by council. Thank you for that. And there was in-kind funds. It was total project was $30,000. There was in-kind funds from Public Works of $5,000. In-kind funds or funds from the capital project for fire department of $5,000. And the biggest sole commitment was through the Sackville Volunteer Firefighters Association of $20,000 to get this project up and moving. At that time, council was also made aware that any future purchases of $6,000 and over would be coming back for their consideration and approval. And I'm happy to say, in working with the town engineer, him and his staff have facilitated and completed the site prep work and all the in-kind services for the training facility. So we're ready to move on to our next phase, in which that would be buying and purchasing sea containers to help start developing the all the training evolutions that we're looking forward to enhancing the skill sets on. And Deputy Chief Finney is on the call tonight as well. Sean is our training deputy, and he has sourced 4 sea containers from Riverside Warehousing Limited for $16,560, including HST. And the price of these 4 containers would include a delivery to the site at the Public Works compound. I must note that Sean and I had the opportunity to meet with Dwayne and Rob as superintendent on site last week, and very impressed, well developed. And I know Dwayne is also looking to put a bit of a confined space scenario training evolution there as well. So we're looking forward to moving forward in the next phase of this facility and looking forward to seeing it come to fruition. Sean, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that or not.
No, I think you got it all covered.
Thank you, sir.
We wanted you on the screen there, Sean. So, open for question. If I could ask one, is this going to be limited to our Sackville Volunteer, or are you looking at this being something in conjunction with the other volunteer fire departments around us?
Thank you, Worship. Very good question. Actually, Sean and I had that discussion on site while we were there last week, and we see once it's developed, we see coming up with some type of measure that we would welcome fire departments for the surrounding areas to come in and train as well. And we also hold mutual aid agreements with all the outlying fire departments as well. So it would only enhance what we already have for a working relationship. So yes, to answer your question, we would certainly be looking to offer them the training as well.
Councillors, any other questions?
Your Worship, Councillor Michaud here. Just one quick question, if I could, please.
Please. ahead.
Just in regards to the fire department, your abilities to be able to raise funds over the years. Recently, you had to cancel your truck draw for this year, and just wondering how you see that kind of affecting your abilities to contribute to projects like this in the future. Do you feel that you still be able to? I think this is a great partnership. I know in many years ago, the same thing was done with, I think, one of the first rescue vehicles that was ever purchased for the town, brand new. The town funded it, and then the firefighters raised the money to pay the municipality back. And I think it's a great initiative. I just would like to see that type of work continue. That's all.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Michaud. Yes, you are correct. These funds, that the $20,000 were earmarked back from our 2018 truck draw, and we were into our 15th annual truck draw this year. And unfortunately, due to the unprecedented times of COVID, we did have to cancel our draw this year. The community has been very supportive of the fire department over the years, and we thank you very much for that. However, we believe once we are out of these unprecedented times a bit and we look at the new normal, we believe we can come out and start another truck draw, and would be very favorable.
That's good news. Thank you. Any other questions, folks? Substantive work from public safety. Thank you very much. It's always good news when we hear how well you're being equipped and trained. We all appreciate that. Are there any other comments before we move to look for a motion to adjourn?
Just one thing, Your Worship, and you didn't hear me, I guess, when we were talking about approval of the agenda. I just wanted to clarify maybe when we might start getting the RCP back into our meeting agendas for updates.
A good question, Mr. Burke or Town Clerk, who would respond to that?
I would leave that to CAO Jamie Burke.
Yes, sorry, Your Worship, I was on. I had to unmute myself there. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Michaud, too, for the question. I've spoken to Sergeant Gagne directly, and I guess we talked about his participation in this type of meeting. The RCMP, fortunately or unfortunately, have some technology incompatibility issues with their machines. So he's not able to join us on his work computer for this type of discussion. So until such time as we're out of the kind of virtual meetings, Sergeant Gagne will be providing his typical thorough update as part of the regular meeting format. And I think I speak for all of my colleagues on the line here that we, as much as you, and I know the members of the public, we're looking to getting back to a new normal of in-person meetings as quickly as we can. We realize that we're at the mercy of the technology, and the technology always doesn't go according to plans, unfortunately. So, like Sergeant Gagne, Councillor Michaud, we're all looking forward to getting back to in-person meetings as quickly as we possibly can, provided we can do that safely. So in the interim, you will be receiving updates along with the public through Sergeant Gagne's regular reporting structure.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Burke. My other question is just, and I think that's something that's probably on all our minds, is the opportunity for council to discuss the economic impact of COVID-19 and our university. I'm just hoping that will be coming to the agenda soon with council.
Your Worship, would you like me to provide a quick commentary on that, or would you like to? It's entirely up to you.
No, why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Michaud. This is a really, these are, I think we've used the word unprecedented more so in the last few months than we ever have, of course. But there is, these are extremely tough times. I can't stress this enough for the local business community, and we've now started having weekly check-ins with several local business owners and operators, and there's been a request for that meeting format and just opportunity, I guess, to continue. So we had a very productive and positive call on Friday, and several items came out of that meeting, several action items. And one, I guess, is that there seems to be an interest or willingness amongst the local owners and operators for us to contemplate establishing some type of Economic Recovery Fund, as well as the town pursuing a variety of economic development related interests. I'll give you just one example would be a kind of a virtual or interactive Sackville shopping map. And shopping, of course, being more than just retail, we would also focus on our strong culinary sectors as well. So we're exploring a variety of options to see what the costs and logistical requirements would be, but certainly I would not be surprised if we do put a request in through your worship to potentially have a special meeting here in the near future where we dedicate the entire meeting towards the economic recovery efforts across the community. So it's a really valid point, Councillor, something we're looking into very closely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, there are so many irons in the fire here. The Chantamar COVID Task Force has a business-oriented one. The town's got its own efforts working directly with folks. The Chamber of Commerce out of Moncton has developed its a structure that they're trying to implement here as well. And Mount A and the town have both a political level with myself between the president and the staff that are working exactly on working on the ability of Mount Allison to get as many students as possible and what role the town plays in that. And as for those of you who have seen it, we've had a couple of attempts to prompt the Premier to look at some of the lessons here that can be used, some of the lessons we've learned with COVID, of how the province can better respond to some of the recovery efforts. And indeed, one of the things that's happening right now is that the Premier has a set of webinars over the next week or so that seeks out exactly that. They don't make any reference to that being our suggestions, but what have we learned through this the response to COVID on a whole bunch of fronts, whether it's health, business, export, schooling, education. So there is a lot of stuff going on, and I think your point is well taken, Sean, that we should have the town briefed on all of these items that are going and which ones look like they're working well and which ones might need a little bit of a kick.
And your worship, just if I can add one thing, I think I kind of one thing I didn't mention in my brief comments was, I guess, our relationship with Mount Allison. And you know, I'm now meeting weekly with Gloria Jollimore as one of their senior staff, and we've kind of expanded that to include some of our additional staff and some of Mount A's additional staff. And we're really you know, looking to pull out all the stops and brainstorm about what are the best ways to get those returning students to come back to Mount Allison and Sackville, and what are some clever and unique ways that we can get some of those first year students to understand, I guess, the how fortunate we are here in Sackville with an abundance of space outside, but also an abundance of space on the university with over 1 million square foot of buildings. That they do have the ability, and we will see with their operational plan that they do have the ability to put in place a program that can keep students safe and continue their academic journey here in Sackville. So we're working very closely. Obviously, student recruitment has economic benefits for us as a municipality, and when the university is healthy, our community is healthy, and the municipality included. So I just wanted to make that point that we are working very closely with our friends at Mount Allison on student recruitment and retention.
So I think the point's well taken. Let's have staff schedule an update and all of the topics related to recovery on many fronts. I think that would be a really good session for us to have soon. Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Any other comments, questions on the council meeting? If not, I'd be prepared to take a motion.
Councillor Michaud, so moved to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Michaud to adjourn.
I'll second.
Councillor Finney seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you all very much.